Okay, guys, welcome again. I'm Corey Smith from Horse Racing Tell Me How. Tonight on the panel, we have once again Simon Vivian from Inglis. I've even got my Inglis cap on tonight just to give their little sale a bit of a spruik for all the help that Simon's given me with the webinars and all the interesting information he's given us over the first few weeks. I've got Nathan Bennett here from Bennett Racing. Nathan's a syndicator, but also loves his horse racing on top of that, as most of the syndicators do. And a little bit of a different angle tonight with the syndication, understanding how syndication works, understanding what they look for. We also have David Azzopardi from Dream Thoroughbreds, once again a syndicator. It's really interesting stories. Both David and Nathan have some great stories, and we'll go into those as we get through the webinar. And finally, Mitch Freedman, who is another one of the upcoming trainers. So as you've noticed on the first 2 weeks, and also some of the panelists we've announced, we have some outstanding young trainers who are the future of the sport, and Mitch is one of those. So welcome to all our panelists, but what we're here to do is to listen to them give us some information on how we might approach the sales. The sale I've chosen this time is the Melbourne Gold yearling sale. I've chosen that sale for 2 reasons. The first reason is the first week we spent looking at a sale that had already been, so we already knew the prices, so that made it a lot easier for us at ground level. We're now going to attempt with our homework to go to a sale, and we're really going to, in that sale, we're going to go there with no prior knowledge and look at how can we get involved, and what's our plan now that we understand a little bit more about racing, a little bit more about ownership. What's our plan? So firstly, I'll go to you, David. How would you approach a sale like the Melbourne Gold as a syndicator?
Yeah, thanks, Corey. Well, like any sale that's all the yearling sales, we're pretty much approaching in the same way. We go through the whole catalogue pretty much to look at pedigrees that may stand out to us. I use a bloodstock agent, independent bloodstock agent, Bluegrass Bloodstock with Lenny Russo. He generally inspects all the yearlings for confirmation type issues. And then from there, he'll shortlist them, and if they match the ones that I've shortlisted on pedigree, then we'll get them vetted and pretty much look at what values they are going to be sold at, basically.
Yeah, and Nathan, similar to yourself, or a slightly different approach?
So what we would do, Corey, probably I'd go over a lot of fillies that are well-bred fillies, because I do like purchasing fillies with residual value, as we call it. So I don't spend a lot of time on looking at the pedigrees. We will go and look at every horse. Phil Wells, who's my bloodstock advisor, and myself will go around and look at every horse on the complex, and then we'll check the pedigrees after we see the types. So we'll pick out the types and then pretty much go from there. But we do focus on a lot of well-bred fillies. But I think a sale like this, I think you can get really good value, as we were talking before. It could be a sale where you don't have to spend a lot, and people can get in a really nice horse, hopefully be Vogus, and they can get in for a really, really good value.
Yeah, and Mitch, as a trainer, would it be a sale? I know that you go to a variety of sales around the country, and you're always looking at your website and looking at different horses that you have purchased. There's a bit of a range of price there. Do you look at a sale like this as something that has potential value? Oh, I've lost you, Mitch. You're muted. Yep.
Sorry, guys, we're going again now. Yeah, definitely is a sale that's value. Obviously, not one of the major sales, but it's certainly a good starting point, a sale like this, to make sure that you've got someone that's got a keen eye for a horse. It's probably not so much about the pedigrees, but having a good type of horse, and obviously the Inglis, and inspect a lot of them and grade them into each sale. But it's done a little while ago now, so there's certainly improvements in different horses there, and some value to be found.
Yep, and obviously Simon, we spoke a lot about the Melbourne Premier sale in the first episode of the webinars, but this is a very different type of sale. And as the guys all alluded to, there is a lot of value in this sale. And with coronavirus, do you expect there to be even more value in the sale? And how would you see it, I guess, from an Inglis perspective?
Corey, firstly, these sales do present extraordinary opportunities for people to get involved at a very, very affordable avenue into the industry, because the sale is probably going to average around about $20,000. We have to remember that historically there's been some fabulous horses come out of the sales, like the Melbourne Gold, the Melbourne Gold sale, horses like Polanski, who won a VRC Derby, Malaguira, historically a horse like Pompey Ruler was a graduate of this sale, Lyuba, who cost under $5,000. So you can buy fantastic value, but what it does do is it gives entree to getting involved in the ownership. So if you look at expensive sales, it costs a lot more to get involved at the ground level. This does give you a chance to find a really nice horse. There is always a diamond amongst the pebbles, and I can promise you that for the 2020 edition of the Melbourne Gold sale, there are some very, very nice horses that are going to be sold that will ultimately become very good racehorses.
Yeah, and a question here for both of the syndicators. So we'll start with David. David, with something that a lot of people ask, and obviously Nathan alluded to residual value, but a filly or a colt, for what reasons would we look at one, not the other, or vice versa?
Well, we don't really particularly look for a particular filly or a colt. We've had very good success with our colts. So we have been a syndicator that's probably concentrated on colts in the last few years. One of our colts, I Am Immortal, has just gone to stud at Swettenham. So we've got a lot of people sort of looking at our syndicates because of the colts we've purchased in the past. And we do partner up with Anthony Freedman and Kieran Maher, who have had good success with colts in the past as well. But fillies, I do look at the fillies. I'm very particular about my fillies that they have active families. So what I mean by active families is that I generally wouldn't go for a first foal in a pedigree of a filly. I want to buy a filly that's got some progeny on the ground racing now that may be coming through the grades that I think is going to that's going to increase the value of the filly that I've purchased. So, for instance, at the Classic sale, I bought a filly by Winning Rupert out of a mare called Icy Heels. She was a half sister to a horse called Parody. Parody had only won a maiden at Bendigo by the time that sale was on, but there was a very good spruik on Parody, being a nice horse coming through the ranks. And since I've bought my filly, she's gone out and won a Group 3 Parody. So my filly that's what I'm calling about an active family. There's a filly there, a half sister that's racing, that's now black type. So my filly's now worth a bit more than what I paid for her at the sale. So that's what I'm looking for when I'm buying fillies specifically. Colts, I'm looking for type and probably looking at the pedigree through the dam line.
Yep. No, and Nathan, I know that your preference is fillies, and if you could expand on why that is, and I know that you have a particular type of residual value that you look for. So.
Yeah, it's funny that the first 5 horses we brought this year, 3 of them were colts, so it's pretty unpredictable. But we do focus a lot on well-bred fillies. I suppose what David was just saying, if they can, obviously, if the family can improve on top of a well-bred filly, then you're probably getting your purchase price back even before they race as a broodmare. So you're hoping that your horse can obviously do the job as well, but I suppose it just lowers the risk. Whereas you go buy a colt, he gets gelded. He's worth $5,000 if he can't run. A filly that's, let's say she's a half-to Group 1 winner, you pay $100,000, for example, she might be worth 60 or 70 if she doesn't race, or she might be worth 50 grand. You're going to get something back. Whereas, yeah, the colt, if he does get snipped and can't run, he's not worth a lot of money. So I suppose I just try and lower the risk wherever I can. And that's how we sort of purchase our horses in the end, is tick all our boxes that we want to tick. And then if I would never take a colt off, like they're always on our list. And as I say, out of the 5 horses we've purchased so far this year, 3 of them are colts. So sort of just it happens as the hammer falls, mate. It just there's no predicting what you can actually do at the sale, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting debate that always goes on as what is the best way to go. And Mitch, as a trainer, does it enter your thoughts, the residual values, and how do you see the differences? Obviously, David has a great example with I'm Immortal becoming a stallion, which is, the dream. But that dream is obviously few and far between quite often. And what's your preference?
Look, I don't really have a preference as such, but just with the right type. I've probably so far had good success buying colts, and there might be a short time racing and an option to sell them on to Asia or something like that as well. And then obviously you've got the fillies that have got the residual value in the breeding barn. So I don't have a preference as such. When I go to the sales, I just look for a fast horse.
Can I just add, Corey?
Yep.
Yeah, with colts, obviously it's a bit like winning Tats Lotto if you can get one to go to stud, but there's been some great geldings through the years, and Simon mentioned a horse that I was sort of associated with, Malaguera, who was bought out of that gold yearling sale, who had a fairly nice pedigree, but he was always going to be a gelding, and he ended up going on to win Group 1s. And the thing about geldings is they actually become racehorses, and they can race for 4 or 5 years pretty consistently. I think Mitch will probably agree with that. They're very consistent animals, geldings. They give you 100% every time. So if you're in it just to go to the races and have fun, a gelding can be just as much fun as a colt or a filly.
Yeah, and that's good advice. It's very interesting just to get the different views. And what we're going to do now is we're going to get on to our first part of the homework. So we wanted a stayer. Simon, if you could just touch on what makes them a staying type.
I suppose the main part about it, am I still there? Sorry.
Yeah, yep, we can hear you.
But the main thing that happens, Corey, the main thing you start to look for is the bloodlines. You'd find that certain sires become dominant as sires of stayers, and then you look at the female pedigree as well. I'm a great believer in breeding like to like, so I like to see a staying type, sort of a mare with a staying type of pedigree go to a staying sire, and generally that's a bit like apples don't fall far from the tree. So the first thing you look at is the pedigree, and then secondly, of course, you look at the physical conformation, because generally you'll find that stayers are built very differently to sprinters. And if you look at your human athletes, you think about your 100-metre sprinters at the Olympic Games versus your guys who run 10,000 metres or marathons, they're built very differently, and horses can be a bit the same. And I think that those that people have been in the industry for some period of time start to look at a certain physical aspects of a horse and work out which ones are likely to be horses that have got the physical attributes of a stayer.
Yep, and I think in this sale, a few people have given some great answers. So the Teofilo out of Hot Augusta has some, I think it's got the biggest numbers here, 13 or 14 people have selected. And Amy Batsiokis said Teofilo sired Melbourne Cup winner Cross Counter, as well as other quality staying horses such as Humidor and Happy Clapper. So, I mean, that's a great horse in the sale there straight away. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, he's been an outstanding sire of stayers. He himself is a son of Galileo, probably the greatest sire that the world has seen probably in the last 20 years. And probably in the last 50 years, the best sire has been his father, Sadler's Wells. On this occasion, this colt is also out of the Zabeel mare. And Zabeel has been one of the phenomenal influences in the Southern Hemisphere for the last 20 years. So when you look at that pedigree, he was probably a fairly obvious type of a colt for people to identify as a potential stayer.
Yeah, a couple of sires I don't know a lot about, but Nathan, you actually selected Dandino out of Viano, which has 7 or 8 people who have picked that same horse. What were your reasons on that?
I suppose I've got a bit of a soft spot for Dandino because I actually raced him, Corey, but I've always said I'd love to. He was a pretty serious horse, and I'm surprised he sort of. I don't know what sort of happened. No one really wanted him as a stallion, but he was a really good stayer. And then obviously the dam has actually won over 2,000 metres. which would be, and this wouldn't be a very expensive horse. And I'm sure Dan Dino will throw a nice staying type of horse. Having Costa mare, are going to be a bit of a no-brainer. This one, like a cheap horse that hopefully could run if it was a nice type. Obviously, there's no photos or anything, but yeah, I believe Dan Dino will throw a really good horse. Like all stallions do, but I saw what he could do, and he had a serious turn of foot on him.
Yeah, and I guess, obviously we don't know what the horses look like too much at this stage, and that's part of the beauty of the brief, is that we're going in a little bit blind, and the process would be for you guys to go and look at the actual athlete as well. But interestingly enough, another one I don't know a lot about is the My Boy Charlie sire. My Boy Charlie out of Roman Goddess. Mitch and David have both selected that one. So David, firstly, what attracted you to that colt first, and then I'll get Mitch's thoughts after that.
Yeah, this sale was a bit harder to find a staying type in it. It's probably, they're a bit few and far between. My Boy Charlie, I've had a lot of success with a My Boy Charlie gelding that I raced. He won 6 or 7. He got injured on the racetrack. Unfortunately, he got retired, a horse called Charles in Charge. But I actually had a bit of an opinion of My Boy Charlie as a sire, and Simon could probably add to this. I think they took him. He was siring in the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere, and he's back in the Northern Hemisphere, I think. But there's not a lot of them around. But he was the sire of Jamaica, who won the Caulfield Cup, and she was a talented mare, very strong. She raced as I think even as a 2-year-old, great 3-year-old year. She won the Oaks. And then she went on and progressed to win a Caulfield Cup. And she was probably one of the best staying mares we've sort of raced in the last few years, since sort of Maccabi Diva period. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to like about that sort of colt on paper. I think one of the things about the staying types is, as Nathan said, they're probably going to go at reasonable value prices. You do have to wait for them a bit longer, though. So you're looking at a horse that's not going to be a real muscly athlete in that parade ring, but you've got to try and understand what it's going to develop into as it grows older. And Simon and Mitch will probably talk, explain that a bit better to everyone as well.
Just before we go to Mitch, Simon's one that you liked was Lot 303 to Done Deal out of Blessed. You liked that, but also I believe it was in an earlier sale and passed in. Is that correct?
It was, Mitch. It was, Corey. Look, these sorts of horses, because this sale is located where it is, it gives people a second chance to go and sell again. So some of these horses were catalogued for earlier sales and may have been passed in, may have been withdrawn. Sometimes the cream just flows to the top of the cream flows to the top of the milk all the time. And in this situation, I believe that a horse like Done Deal, he's proven himself to be an outstanding sire. This colt that I've identified here is out of a Commands mare. There's nice black type in the pedigree, but the most important thing for me was the fact that he's by an outstanding son of High Chaparral in Done Deal, doing a great job. So I really like the horse, and I think he's another great opportunity for people to get involved.
Yep. And Mitch, I've held off a little bit there. I've got a question there from one of our participants just to make sure that we do mention the lot numbers. So firstly, the lot number 135 was the My Boy Charlie. Firstly, why you like that one, Mitch, but also David has selected a Pesance de Lune. So if you can touch firstly on the My Boy Charlie, but also on the Pesance de Lune, because you've had a lot of success with Pesance de Lune, both the horse itself and some of its progeny in your stable at the moment.
Yeah, so just the reason why I selected the My Boy Charlie basically had a fair bit to do with the dam side there, out of a Roman Emperor mare, out of a mare that had placed in the Oaks, and then the third dam, Nassabel by Nassapor, produced Frightening. It was a pretty sort of handy stayer in the early 2000s, trained by Bart Cummings. So just a bit of stoutness in the pedigree there, and obviously My Boy Charlie being the sire of Jamaica, just thought it might be one that might be able to stay a bit. If you could just give me the lot number there of the Pesance de Lune.
The lot
409.
409. Lot number 409, Mitch.
So basically the Pesance de Lune, I've bought one in New Zealand with this same cross, Chamadel out of High mare this year. I mean, it'll be interesting to see, but I sort of like to see them as a type. I've got a few in the stables, and I think the better ones I've got in the stables are all a similar type. So looking for something with a bit of leg underneath it and a bit of size about it seems to be the right, the right recipe for success. But
when you say a bit of leg, Mitch, for those of us that probably don't know horses as well as you guys that are on the panel, what does a bit of leg mean?
So not looking for that short coupled, horse that looks like it's going to grow early. Both of those horses are probably 16, 3 pushing 17 hands in southern. So you're not going to be waiting for them forever, but they're not short, stocky, short coupled sort of horses.
Yep. A couple of other horses that have got a good mention here, Simon, is Lot 159 by it's Kermadec out of See How You Are, Lot 159. And then there was another one, so there's a lot of people who like that. But then one that both Nathan and yourself liked was the Lot 368 Jackalberry out of Dressed.
Look, I saw Jackalberry both as a racehorse, and I saw him when he went to stud in New Zealand, Corey, and he was such a great looking horse. He was a very, very talented racehorse, and it probably was very, very underregarded when he went to stud. But on this occasion, he himself was a gifted staying horse. We've got a horse here that is out of a Zabeel mare. The Grand Dam is by Danehill, who was so versatile. He was able to get horses that ran over the shortest trips of 800 metres right up to 2 miles. It's a decent black type staying family. There's plenty of stakes winners throughout it, and I'm a bit of a fan of Jackalberry. As I said, he was a good-looking horse. He was placed in the Melbourne Cup. He was a gifted performer and a very good-looking horse. So and that was the sort of colt that I thought was probably not going to make a lot of money, but could end up being a really useful staying sort of horse. Yeah,
and I think just as we're going there, you can see the polls up on the screen, guys. I've actually, because we're going to a sale and we potentially need to have a short list, I've actually allowed you to vote for more than one horse on the poll this time. So feel free to vote away there. And while we're doing that, just what are the risks associated with going for a staying type, Simon? What would you say the risks and obviously the benefits?
Corey, I think there's a few benefits. Firstly, I think that at times we do put too much pressure on horses that have supposedly the pedigree and conformation to be 2-year-olds. So whilst we think about them being, bred to run early and physically looking like they can run early, we try and make them perform early, and that can often be a little bit like putting a 15 or a 16-year-old lad on an AFL footy field. It just might bust them. Whereas when you've got a stayer, it's a mental approach by both the owners and the trainers to give the horses a little bit more time, which allows bones to settle, and it just gives them time for their physical aspect to mature. And the other part for me, that in a country where such a focus on 2-year-old racing and on sprint racing, there's so much amazing prize money in Australia for horses that can run at 3 years and older over a mile and further. So for me, to own a staying horse, you're going to get greater longevity out of the horse. You're going to see horses like your Humidors and these types of horses that run on for many, many years, and they're going around for such fantastic prize money. The principal prize money earners, if you look at the prize money won by Winx and Maccabi Diva versus Black Caviar, it's the prize money. The prize money is very much toward the stayers, but the competition is toward the sprinters. So I think it's a real opportunity that's probably not being addressed properly at this point.
Yeah, and a couple of people just asked why certain lot numbers were not up in my voting. The reason is I can only have 10 horses in the voting, so I've gone for those that were the most popular, and then we've gone from there. So we're just going to finish there. The winner is Lot 436, Tiafilio out of Hot Augusta. Looks like if we're going to the sales, Simon, we're going to have a red-hot crack at that one. So I'll just share the results for people to have a look there at the differences. So can you see that up on your screen?
Indeed.
Perfect.
That's great. That horse is sure to command a great deal of attention up later in the sale, so you'll have plenty of time to see the other horses go through and hopefully enjoy the success of buying Lot 436.
All right, guys. So on to the next part, the first season sires. Nathan and David will go to the syndicators for this one to start. So start with you, Nathan. What do we look for with a first season sire? What are you mainly going after? It's usually a horse you like the look of on the track, or?
I suppose I actually only started buying first season sires last year. I was originally taking that out of my risk factor. I'd rather buy bread and butter size, but Phil Wells, who does all my bloodstock work, he convinced me that I'm going to lose a chance at a lot of really good horses, and that happened when Yes actually came out and did what he did, because we actually really liked that horse. So Phil said to me, I think you probably need to get rid of that first season sire list rule. So I suppose you're trying to find the one that's not going to go for a ridiculous amount of money, because they do pay a lot more for them. I suppose if you're looking at a first season sire, you want to choose a sire that you loved watching race, and then you got to work it out from there. But so I've only brought one lot of first season sires. They're yet to get to the track yet. So the proof will be in the pudding there whether I'm any good at picking them out. But I suppose it's the same as looking at every other horse as well, really. You're looking at them on type, but then you obviously got to try and find the ones that you can actually afford under the hammer.
No, and I think obviously there's risks associated with it. But David, do you approach it similar to Nathan, or do you have a different approach to first season sires? Do you feel there's a certain market that is interested in that when you're syndicating them?
I agree with Nathan. You got to be careful. A lot of them go to the sales with a bit of a boom on them, because they've just come off the racetrack, a lot of them, so people know them. So people are interested in buying into them because they refer back to the horse that they've seen recently. A horse like, for instance, Extreme Choice, he's a first season sire. He only raced like 3 or 4 years ago, so he's very recent on the list of everyone. So, but I think the thing about first season sires is you've still got to buy value, and you've got to go to these sales and do your homework. And some of them I like more than others. Some of them I've got a boom on them, and I look at them and I'm not particularly, I don't understand why there's such a boom on them. But some of them are, some of the first season sires are promoted very well by the studs. Some studs have got a big marketing budget behind them, and they can really push the value of those up. But in particular, I really like Winning Rupert as a first season sire. I think all the progeny I've seen, they've been very athletic. They look like they're very precocious types. The feedback from the trainers already has been that they are fairly precocious types, so they'll be up and running early. And Winning Rupert was retired after 6 starts. He won his first 5, won 3 stakes races by, large margins. And his progeny has been quite good value at the sale. So he's a first season sire that I've taken a chance on.
Yeah, lot 169 actually. So that's good you mentioned that, David. That was quite popular. You selected it yourself, and 5 other participants picked that one, lot 169, which is Winning Rupert out of Shoe Fetish. So, Mitch, just with yourself as a trainer, do you have any preference to go with tried and true sires, or do you like the idea of a first season sire? What are the risks as a trainer with that?
So there's a number of risks there. If you're buying a stallion that is from overseas, it's probably not well known here. But obviously you're trying to get ahead of the market by buying some of those first season sires. So I like to see them stamping their progeny. I don't like to go and buy first season stallions that don't stamp their progeny. What I mean by that is they want to have similar traits, whether that be shape, muscle, the shape of their head, even colour, things like that. I want to see a stallion doing that. I don't want to see the stallion sort of weak when they're stamping them and then have the horses all look different. So I really like the Extreme Choices, the Sabugs and the Territories this year as first season sires myself. I thought they put a good stamp on their stock. I managed actually to pick up a Territories down in Tassie as a first season sire, and I'd seen a lot of them, and they made really good money at Melbourne. And you sort of just try and put yourself a little bit ahead of the game that way. But that's the way I approach them, and it's sort of a bit each to their own. But obviously, you're one of seeing the ability on the racetrack and see it pass them to their side.
Yep. So I guess the reward is that you may get it a little bit cheaper than once it's had some success, and the risk is obviously there that it may not be a good sire. So Nathan, just to touch on that, Flying Artie is an interesting one. I know that Phil, your bloodstock agent, has a real interest in Flying Artie, and it could be something there. And it's got a few people have selected. I'll just find the lot number here, but the lot number for the Flying Artie that people liked was 433. Lot 433 out of Holly Molly had a few people interested in that. What are your thoughts on the Flying Artie?
I actually liked. I've only been to one sale this year because obviously COVID-19's stopped us after that. Or not long after anyway. So I actually liked the Flying Arties up at the Gold Coast. We actually had a few on our lists. I think Flying Artie, he'll certainly throw some nice horses, I would have thought. He certainly had a really good turn of foot. Probably should have won a Blue Diamond. Did he? Or he actually did win it, did he? No, he did win the Blue Diamond, did he?
And second.
Ran second, yeah. He should have beaten Extreme Choice that day. Flew down the outside. So I'd be surprised if he doesn't throw some nice horses. Extreme Choice, I know Mitch just mentioned him. He had some really nice types up at the Gold Coast as well. Capitalist. They were probably my top three first season sires that I saw of their progeny this year.
Capitalist was very popular here. Lot 65 out of Miss Mossman and lot 385 out of Feeling Positive was very popular by both yourselves as panelists and a lot of the participants like the Capitalist progeny as well.
Well, I know what Dave was saying before about some of the first season sires that get pumped right up. I think he was in that, I think, and the prices, like they were through the roof. I'd preferred to wait, and in 2 years' time, I know how quickly people jump off them. And I remember a few years back, Piero and All Too Hard, everyone was off him, and they were going pretty cheap. And now Piero is probably one of the best stallions in Australia, and All Too Hard certainly getting the job done as well. So I think I don't mind waiting a couple of years.
Yeah, and I'll have a chat with Simon because obviously, I personally love first season sires. I think it's the excitement of almost it's like having a punt. You go for it, and if you get lucky, you might get a really good one. I kind of like that. And a few people have selected lot 107, Maurice, out of Pristine Girl, and I obviously just picked up a Maurice. So I'm hoping that those guys that have done their homework are spot on the money and Maurice throws some nice ones. But Simon, there's a few here that are worth mentioning. Lot 60 by Cable Bay out of Miss Eddie. There's a few others that people have had here. So Frosted's an interesting one. So Bo Tran has said he wanted dams that were proven to have success, as most of the first season sires were successful of. Also, the Japanese horses. So we touched on Maurice, but also there's some Mickey Isle in there. So what are your thoughts on Frosted, Mickey Isle, Maurice, the foreign influences there, Cable Bay?
Corey, look, all of these horses that do come into the country come in with outstanding credentials, and probably another horse that we haven't mentioned tonight, but has been very, very popular is a horse called Shalar, who stands at Arrowfield, and his first crop of yearlings have been very popular. Look, these horses all come in with extraordinarily high credentials, and they're going to be given every opportunity at stud, as are the colonial horses. We've mentioned horses like Capitalist, Flying Artie, Extreme Choice, are all getting fabulous chances. Now, at the end of the day, we know that there will only be one champion first season sire, and hopefully there'll be a number of them that will ultimately be successful. But look, the reality is that we know that it's very, very hard to find your way into the top 10 of a sires list. And I respect what Nathan said earlier, that historically he's been probably a little less inclined to buy first season and stick with the tried and true, the proven sires. I think every year, what you said about the excitement of the first season sires, I think we all feel that. We all sense that when we get the new season of 2-year-olds racing, the first thing we look for is not the Schnitzels and the I'm Invincibles. We're looking for the first season sires. So there's a real charisma and charm that comes with them. And look, at the moment, quite frankly, they're basically all even. What we have to be probably conscious of is that we tend to judge a lot of these first season sires along whether they're going to be likely sires of 2-year-olds. You look at a horse like Flying Artie, he's by Artie Schiller out of a Rubiton mare. I think that they're probably going to be much better horses at 3 and older. I'm a bit of a fan of Flying Artie. I've seen them progress through their maturity phases. I thought that they were raw, gangly sorts of weanlings that became very nice yearlings. And I think that ultimately they might end up being pretty good racehorses. So look, there's no right and wrong answer. We can all sit there and vote on our first season size, and I'd love to be able to come back in 4 years' time or 3 years' time and sit back and rehash it, because we'll find that probably most of us will have been wrong.
And I've just put up the poll there, but while we're waiting for the results of the poll, Mitch, you just answered a question by typing the answer. It was just somebody there, Ian, had asked whether or not, as trainers and syndicators, you would like to see them in person, because obviously a lot of the overseas stallions you may not have seen close up. What are your thoughts on that side of it, wanting to see a sire close up and its progeny?
Yeah, so it's difficult. Obviously, there's a lot of first season stallions that come through and aren't successful. I support the dirt horses from overseas or things like that, and I certainly don't tend to get involved in paying big money for first season overseas stallions, because ultimately, if they're successful, you'll probably be able to buy them at a similar price once you've seen them have success on the racetrack in a couple of years' time. So I tend to steer clear of the really high price ones. But if you can sort of find one out that you like as a type, and you're happy to commit to it as a type, then I don't have any problem buying it. And obviously a bit of value. And as we've said, first season sires are ultimately a risk, but a risk that you have to assess. And as I said, if you like them as a type, I'm prepared to take the risk, as long as you're not paying huge money for them.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting with the homework that's come in, a lot of the homework has been similar on the staying type and the pick of the sales. But the first season sire homework, we have such a huge variety of homework that's come in, because everyone has their own preference for a first season sire. And once I stop the poll here, so I'll stop it now, but the winner, there's actually not going to be a winner. There's 3 that are on 29%. Hold on. Capitalist has just pipped them. So that's got 30% Capitalist, 28% for the Flying Artie, lot 433, lot 385 is the winner. And you'll see that's much closer. So I'll just end that poll there and share the results. So that's much closer than we saw, obviously, before, where the majority went for one horse. With the first season sires, I guess the risk is there, but the reward is that not everyone's going for the same horse at the sale. Would that be correct, Simon?
I think that's absolutely the case. I think when we look back historically, Corey, at first season size, the marketing of the stud funds has a dramatic impact on the way that the market responds. But I can go back historically and look at horses like, well, firstly Galileo, but since then horses like Dubawi, Shamadal, these sorts of horses that came to our country and were not overly highly regarded in the sales ring in their first years, that ultimately became phenomenal stallions, some of the world's best stallions. So you've just got to do your homework and follow your own gut feeling.
Can I just add, Corey?
Yep.
I think what's common between what Nathan and Mitch and I have said is we try to minimise risk when we're buying horses. So we're trying to buy value, and the first season sires that we've talked about are all pretty much Australian-based sires that we know. We've seen them in the flesh. We know how they raced. It's very hard for people like us to take a risk on these overseas sides without seeing them and their progeny perform. So we probably look at them in their third or fourth year rather than, you know, in their first season.
Yeah, and that's certainly something for buyers to think about as well, David, as some of the panellists we've had in the past couple of weeks, and obviously next week we have Matt Kamani on. Last week we had Archie Alexander, and they had links to the UK and things like that. And Archie has, you know, he liked Cable Bay, for example, so he's obviously had a better opportunity through his father being a bloodstock agent over there and that type of thing. So sometimes, yeah, like you said, it's minimising risk, which is an important part of the industry. We're going to go on now to the pick of the sales. Now, Simon, for all of the participants and the panellists here tonight, apart from yourself, if we promote these horses as being the best in the sale, we potentially price ourselves out of buying it. So what we might do is put it over to you to start with. What was your pick as the best in the sale? Well,
look, I'm a massive fan. I think it might have been David's a little earlier made a comment about Piero. I think that Piero is one of the great stallions of the country. So my pick of the sale was lot number 452, which is a Piero yearling. A lot of these horses, we want to go and look at them again. So basically, you'll find that the responses that you've had from everybody has been on a sight unseen basis, Corey, which means that we've worked off of pedigree. So we looked at what the sire is and what the female pedigree is. But the next phase, and probably one of the most important aspects of horse selection, comes down to the actual physical inspection of these horses. So that's going to change a few of our opinions down the track. But look, certainly for me, I think that Piero, he will be a perennial top 10 horse for me. He's an outstanding sire, and I think that for me, lot 452 is my pick of the sale, followed by the All Too Hard, lot 67, and lot 303, the Done Deal.
Yeah, and some of the same lot numbers have come up in people's homework here. So we touched on the TFVO out of Hot Augusta, which was very popular. I'll just try and find... David, you went for a Sebring out of Lameriquai. What did you like about that one?
Yeah, the one I thought would top the sale is actually lot 17 by Sebring out of Lameriquai. He's a chestnut colt. Sebring was a chestnut. He's an early foal, September. He's a full brother to a stakes winner, impressing. He's also got another full brother that's stakes placed, which is Virtual Insanity. Lameriquai's by Swazier, who's a great sire in himself. I thought there was a lot of ticks to this horse. I thought he would go close to topping the sale personally, because of his relations, and they're full brothers. They're not half brothers, so that would make him very popular. The horse that I pretty much would probably target myself, because I think he'd be great value, is a Street Boss filly, 117, out of an Exceed and Excel mare. Exceed and Excel is a great broodmare sire. Street Boss is the sire of Hanseatic, the Blue Diamond winner this year. Also got a half that's Intuition, that's a stakes winner. November foal, so because it's a November foal, it's a later foal, would put a lot of people off. They wouldn't necessarily want a November foal, so you may actually pick up this filly at a nice price, at a good value. So yeah, it should be something I'd sort of target.
Yep, yeah. And Nathan, I noticed that you went for lot 195 and lot 404, which are both All Too Hard. One's out of Sublime Girl and one's out of Fistan. What was your thought process there?
So I suppose back to what I was saying earlier, mate, about the proven stallions. So like Piero, All Too Hard a few years ago, they didn't want them. After they had a couple of, they probably only had 20 runners and everyone was sort of jumping off them. But I think All Too Hard is just a bread and butter sire now. I think he's sitting, don't quote me on it, but I think he's up near the top 10 in the general size list at the minute. He's had a fair few stakes winners this year. We've got a really nice filly by All Too Hard. I think they're just tough race horses. And I don't think you can really go wrong buying a nice All Too Hard. And you don't pay overs for them. So, yeah, and the filly there, Obviously, she's out of a Group 3 winner. Group 3 place getter. So there's a bit of black type there as well. I mean, a filly like that, 195, you might pick her up for 20 grand if you're lucky, I suppose. But at the same time, it depends what the sale will be like. But I know Simon said the average was 20,000 last year. Well, she might be touch over the average maybe, but I think buying an All Too Hard or, as Simon said, a Piero, even a Street Boss, David said, you're buying a nice stallion or a nice sire, and then hopefully it's a nice top as well.
Yeah, and I guess and David, you might answer this as well, but as a syndicator, do you go in, generally do you look to buy a horse and then syndicate it? Or would you have a bunch of owners that come to you and say, look, we have this amount of money, we'd like you to go to the sales and buy us a horse?
I think we'd all like that. But, we speculate every horse that we buy. So effectively, the way we run Dream, we don't buy a huge number of yearlings through the year. We'll buy sort of 6 to 8 every season. I actually look at the horse and basically do all your research, or you do your bloodstock work, you get your vet to check it. I basically buy a horse that I would want to own myself. So I'll take a share in every horse that we syndicate. So if I'm not in love with that horse because I wouldn't own it myself, then I wouldn't buy it. But I mean, there's lots of horses you fall in love with and you can't afford at the sale anyway. I mean, they're out of your, there's someone with deeper pockets than you. So you can't get too attached to them. But if you do your homework, you'll find value. I think all three of us have found value over the years, and you can find it. You've just got to be patient and wait for all the guys with all the deep pockets to run out of bullets.
Yeah, and I guess, Mitch, would it differ for you going to a sale, or as a trainer last week that Kieran Marstable was talking about, when they go to a sale, most likely they look at the horses. If they like the horse, they go until it passes what they value it at. Would it be the same for you?
Yeah, obviously you're probably you're putting a value on the horses that you look at throughout the sale. So when you're going around and doing your first inspections, I like to try and see every horse when I go to a sale. Probably not only selecting the ones that you want to have a look at again because you really like them, you're also trying to select the ones that are going to fall into your price range. And as the other guys said, I go there and spec the horses when I buy them. You might have 1 or 2 orders for the year, but we might buy 15 to 20 horses for the year, and we'll syndicate the rest of them. So I guess, yeah, you're just trying to find the right value. I mean, sometimes you fall in love with them and pay a bit more than you would like, but at the end of the day, if I can't syndicate them, I am racing them myself. So I've got to like them enough to do that, as David said, and that's sort of the way I go about it.
Yeah, and Simon, a couple up there in the poll that I haven't mentioned. There's lot 213 from Written Tycoon. So we had James Price from Woodside Park Stud on last week. And also there's the Hinchinbrook lot 315, which a lot of people put in their homework. So Jamie Sharp had some interesting stuff there. He was basically saying that he went with proven sires into mares who are stakes performed or have thrown stakes runners of note, and that's why he went for that, the Hinchinbrook. But we had Archie mention a Hinchinbrook last week. So your thoughts on those two?
Corey, they're both by outstanding sires. Obviously, Written Tycoon was just recently relocated from Victoria to New South Wales, but has been our leading sire here and is absolutely a world-class sire. And lot 213, the filly out of the filly. She is a Group 3 winner in New Zealand. So it's a fantastic bloodlines. Again, if we talk about apples falling far from the tree, you buy a champion sire out of a mare that was good enough to win at Group 3 level. So that's a real positive. Lot number 315 by the ill-fated Hinchinbrook. He died far too young. He was an outstanding young sire who was really had his foot on the threshold of being great. He could really have found his way into a perpetual sort of position in the top 10. On this occasion, the colt is out of a Galileo mare. As I mentioned earlier in the evening, Galileo is probably the greatest sire that the world has seen in the last 20 years. He's a phenomenal broodmare sire as well as a great sire and sire of size. So both of those horses are sure to command a great deal of attention, make no mistake.
Yeah, and I've just ended that poll there. So the winner was actually Lot 452, Piero out of Jesse's Dream. So Simon, your sales pitch has been going very well by the look of things there with our participants. So we'll move on now, guys, just to a couple of other things. So I've got a couple of questions here for syndication. So different types of sales are obviously available. And Nathan, this one's for yourself. Obviously a massive win on Saturday for Calcani Royale. And if you could just give us a little bit of the story. I know a little bit of a background on Calcani Royale. It didn't come from the normal, I guess, syndication path, but if you could give us a little background on that and how you got into that one.
Yeah, I suppose a few years ago I was sort of trying to find ways where you didn't have to spend as much to try and buy a yearling as such, and I sort of thought, okay, why don't we buy a weanling and I get a few people interested and say, rightio, we've got X amount to spend, and a few people would just shut the door straight away, said, no, it'll take too long. And a few other guys were like, oh, yeah, I'm happy to chip in 2.5 or $5 grand here, and then we can grow the horse out and hopefully race it down the track. Obviously, it's taken pretty much 2.5 years to get her there, but it's certainly, well, we only paid $30,000 for her. Obviously, we spent a lot of money on getting her to where she is now, but now she's a city winner, and she's got a pretty bright future ahead. She's three wins from 4 starts, and I suppose, yeah, we were just trying to find a way of not having to spend overs. Like if she was at a yearling sale, a filly by Nakoni, a good type like herself, she probably brings 120-odd thousand, and whereas we've only paid 30 under the hammer for her. And yeah, I suppose it was just one of those ones where we're trying to find a way to not have to spend as much to get into the market as such.
Yeah, and it's a great story. I mean, there's a few stories I know with some of your horses, and I'll touch on a couple later on. But David, something with your syndication, which certainly got my attention in terms of a point of difference. But you do a lot of female-only syndications, and if you could give me a bit of a background on that.
Yeah, well, I had to do that because my partner Shannon has got a whole group of girls that have got involved in Dream Thoroughbreds now. So Dream has always been centred around the social aspect of racing too, because ownership can be a long way at times. So creating social engagement with our ownership group has been very important to us. So we've actually attracted a lot of couples into our syndicates. So it's not just a male-orientated sort of sport. We get the wives involved. They like going to races, being social, and the girls have always wanted to sort of race horses on their own in a female-only syndicate. So I'll actually put my hand up early at one of the lots. I can't remember what it was, the Winning Rupert Shoe Fetish lot. Well, the girls actually raced Shoe Fetish as one of their horses in the female-only syndicate. So so we've now seen the progeny of Shoe Fetish coming through, which is exciting. By, as I said, Winning Rupert, who's an exciting sire. So yeah, it's just engagement for all the females. One of the in particular with the female syndicates though, because the females aren't as patient as some of the males. We do try and find types that are going to run early, so sprinter types. We wouldn't particularly buy a staying type for a female-only syndicate. So yeah, we're sort of looking at pretty much fillies that'll sort of race quite early in their preparations in their careers, so that the girls can get to the races and have a bit of fun earlier rather than later. So, but yeah, it's been very good. It is a point of difference. There's a lot of people doing female syndicates as well, and it is centered around the social aspect of it.
Yeah, and I've got a question here that's come through. It's actually a syndication question, but I'll get Mitch to answer it because obviously we don't want to have anyone being biased towards trainers, Mitch. But the question is, interesting to know whether there's any additional costs for going through a syndicator as opposed to going through a trainer. So obviously, what are the I won't touch on the costs and that sort of thing, but what are the benefits of going obviously direct to a trainer or going through a syndicator? And I'll get both sides, but obviously keeping you're both going to have business reasons for answering. But yeah, what are your thoughts there? What are the main differences, I guess?
I mean, there's a number of differences, but if you speak to Dave there, obviously they're creating an experience and I guess a social event. Sure, we're in the business of doing that as well, but ultimately I'm in the business of being a horse trainer. So it's hard to do all those things well. So I guess it's what sort of experience you're after when you get into ownership. And as I said, David mentioned that with the social aspect of it, and we play a small part in that. But ultimately, I'm training the horses, and each syndicator will have their fees and things associated. And I think they're justified based on the experience you get and how much you enjoy that experience. And then obviously the trainers set up their costs differently. So everyone's, I suppose, got different ways that they like to get into the ownership. And I suppose it's a good thing to research what those fees are associated, whether it be through the trainer or through the syndicator.
Yeah, and Nathan, just touching on that, I mean, there are some common misconceptions in syndication, but one of the reasons I chose both yourself and David to come on the panel is when I did my research online, both of you advertise all of your fees, so they are both upfront. So David's are all upfront, so are yours. There are fees which are on top of trainer fees, and obviously there are certain costs to go with a syndicator that are extra, which that pay, like Mitch said, that pays for the experience you're buying.
Yep.
But I guess what are some of the things that people should look for when they're going to a syndicator? What are the things they should be, potential traps out there?
Well, I suppose some of those, the management fees, some of them can be a little bit over the top, but I suppose if you're going in a syndicated horse, as Mitch and Dave both alluded to about the social aspect, like the trainers don't have a lot of time to focus on that. As Mitch said, their training horses is number one, and then we can come in the other end with looking after the owners, making it an experience for everyone. Have stable events. You can have events at race clubs, and you can actually have you could have 4 or 5 trainers there, and everyone gets to meet every one of the trainers rather than just meeting one trainer. So I suppose that's a good benefit there. In the way of the traps, I don't really know too much about some of our competitors, mate, but I suppose you just want to make sure that you're going to get good communication with your horse at the end of the day. And if you don't get that, then I suppose that's a bit of a trap, because if you're paying a management fee but not getting anything different from just the trainer's feedback, and if you're not getting extras on top of it, you probably want to be wary of that.
Yeah, and it's a hard question, of course. I'm sure it's a hard question for trainers, a hard question for syndicators. And I know from my own personal experience, when I first got involved, I had people saying, don't go with direct to a trainer or don't go with a syndicator. And depending on who you speak to, you're going to get a million different views. So for the people out there, my advice would be do your research. It's really as simple as that. I think that the webinars have shown that some of the knowledge of the people writing in who are just participants, the difference comes through how much time they're going to spend on doing the research. And I think if you research what you're buying into, then I think that doesn't change for it's not even a horse racing thing. That's obviously across the board. Here's one for David, but obviously it's relevant to Nathan as well. Would you consider, Jared Silver's asked, obviously with Tasmania having a bit of a break, would anyone look at syndicating a horse in the untapped Tassie market?
Personally, I wouldn't. I suppose we're Melbourne based. We target, sort of areas of Melbourne and Sydney. The prize money's so good in Melbourne and Sydney nowadays that you only need really to have a horse that wins a city race, once a year to really pay for your costs and have a bit of fun. Other areas like Tasmania, the prize money down there is a lot lower than even in Adelaide. Adelaide's an area that we have got horses, and we'll still take horses there, and Brisbane we've sort of targeted. But those other areas of Tasmania for us are probably not. We want owners to go to the races, enjoy a race day. It is a social event. We do a lot of road trips. So if you're going to Adelaide or Sydney for the day, or even Brisbane for the day, it's quite easy. You can fly across to Tassie, but it's probably not our target market. And because Tasmania Racing's been out of action for 4 to 6 weeks, I'd be wary about where they're going to land at the moment. So I'd just probably sit back and just see how healthy that industry is going to bounce back, I suppose, is probably what I'm looking for right now. But it's not something I've targeted in the past, no.
Yeah, and Mitch, I know that you've gone down to Tassie, for example, the Magic Millions sale down there, and you have some interest in the Tasmanian market. Would you consider racing a horse in Tasmania?
Look, if I was going to take a horse down Tasmania, it would be one to go down there and race in some of their black type races. So whether that be the Cups, and they do hold a few mares races over there. And, there's been a couple of horses from my stable go down there, race in the same interest, but go to another trainer. I suppose that helps their industry keep going with horses up and racing. I myself, outside of those black type races, probably wouldn't take one down there to race myself. I'd probably send it on to another trainer down there.
Yep. And Nathan or Simon, if you could just have a look at the question there from Joseph Schifano and just type an answer there. I didn't quite capture that one, but it would be more relevant to you guys. What we might do, guys, is that then if anyone else has any questions there, Nathan, something else for yourself. I noticed on racing.com earlier this year when one of your horses, Goldie Fox, won. It was during the bushfires, and obviously with coronavirus coming in, we have kind of forgotten about that in some ways. But when the bushfires were coming through Australia and we have had a tough run, you won a race or placed in a race and donated your prize money, and I believe all the owners in that horse donated their prize money. Is that correct?
So no, not all the owners did. I was the only one that actually did. A few Bennett Racing people added to it. I sort of put it out in our newsletter and said, look, it'd be great if people could put. I put $5,000 in, which was my prize money. But when we were kids, we used to travel up pretty much up to Maringula, and we'd always go through that whole area. And when I sort of seen the devastation that was going on there, I said to Dwayne Dunn before he jumped on Goldie Fox that day, I said, if she wins, I'm going to donate all my prize money to the fire fund. And and Dwayne was pretty impressed with that. Like he even gave a salute on the line, but he said that was towards my kind gesture. So I just thought it would be something to help out everyone who was going through a pretty ordinary time. And obviously now the coronavirus has hit as well, so they've all had a pretty tough time down that way, and including everyone now. But to have the fires and then now this, I couldn't think of anything worse really. So it was just something that I thought would be a nice gesture, mate. And obviously got the chocolates, and it all worked out really well.
And I think it's great to have both yourself and David on with the syndication side of it, because and like Mitch alluded to, it is about having an experience when you're with a syndicator. And Simon, just back to yourself, you've been, I haven't asked you too many questions tonight because you got bombarded with them in week one. But I guess going to the sales is something that is very exciting, but with coronavirus, that hasn't been able to happen. How have you found the digital side? Like, how have you adapted as a company with the coronavirus?
Corey, look, all credit to Mark Webster and the IT team in Sydney to initiate online auctions some 3 or 4 years ago for Inglis. And whilst that's when they started, I suppose we were almost to a degree in competition with each other. There was online auctions and there was live auctions. With COVID-19 coming into play, the foundation that we laid for our online auctions has proved to be a major winner, and we've been having some remarkable sales online. We look forward to July nonetheless and being able to get back to doing what we all enjoy doing, and that's having the live auctions and creating the theatre. It's probably going to be a little bit of time before we can get back and having the allowed crowds. We're hoping that we will have somewhere in the vicinity of 500 or 600 people at Oaklands for the Great Southern Weanling Sale and the Melbourne Gold Yearling Sale. But look, it's been a time where we've all had to adapt to change, and I think we've all learned some remarkable new skills and adaptations through the COVID-19 circumstance. And whilst it's been pretty tough going for just about everybody, I hope that we come through it strong.
Yeah, well, we have nearly 1,000 people following the webinars now. Will you have room for all of us at the Melbourne Gold Sale now that we have a big short list of horses that we're going to come there and buy, Simon? Or?
What we'll do is we'll buy some very, very big coats, and we can come in like Jake the Peg with three-legged men and things like that, and we'll try and find a way of squeezing everybody in, because make no mistake, there's as we've said before, Corey, the actual atmosphere that goes on, I'm sure the other boys would be testimony to it, that the atmosphere that can be created at Oaklands with a big crowd of people and a horse auction going on, and you're selling a horse every 90 seconds. There's a bit of theatre to it that a lot of people haven't had the chance to experience, and we'd love to be able to share it with them. Great way of getting involved.
Yeah, and I know that it's coronavirus dependent, but in discussions with yourself, you have said that followers of the webinar will have the opportunity to come to a sale and experience that. So I look forward to, when we're allowed to do that, to gather a group from the webinars and come and meet yourself at the sales, listen to you in your home environment there, selling horses, and come and cheer you on, or even put our hand up here and there. So we look forward to that, and we thank you for the invite.
You're most welcome, mate. Next
week we go to the races. So a question that's been burning from everyone so far, Mitch, is how to read a horse in the mounting yard. And we've heard from several people you're an expert in this field. So I'm going to put you on the spot now. How do we read a horse in the mounting yard?
It's a tricky one. I think the best way to go about reading a horse in the mounting yard is probably to see them on a few occasions. You want to be seeing how they're behaving in the mounting yard when they're going to go and run well, and then also see them how they're behaving in the mounting yard when they're going to go and run poorly. So there's little things that they can do, whether it be sweating or whether it be just above themselves, they're a bit fresh or whatever else. There's a number of things. Obviously, I'm there looking at horses all the time. So there's other little things that I can probably pick up seeing a horse for the first time, whether it be that they're carrying too much condition or they're looking fit or they're looking over the top. There's a number of different things I can sort of see that probably take a long time to explain. But I think it's important if you can see the horses there often and get to know their traits when they're going to perform well or perform poorly. I think that's a good starting point. And then, you probably start to assess fitness levels and the way they're behaving from that.
Yep. So I think, once again, as I mentioned to Simon, 1,000 of the webinar followers will go and cheer him on while he's in the middle of the auction. I think I'll have, once we're allowed back at the races, there'll be 1,000 followers of the webinar coming to stand beside you while you're looking at the horses in the mounting yard as well in Ballarat there on a summer's day, which don't come around too often. So just to wrap up, guys, next week, like I said, we do go to the races. There will be some interesting briefs surrounding that on. So if you start to put your thinking caps on now, basically we want ideas. How can you make the race day experience more exciting? What ideas do you have that maybe we can lobby Racing Victoria or other racing bodies to allow us to do at the races to make it fun? So obviously there's things like fashions on the field, as you can see there, but what other initiatives would you bring in? Also, the big races are always full. Some of the race meetings during the week and those types of things are not always full. So what would you do to bring more people to the races, and certainly how would you bring people to ownership? And I think it'd be really interesting to hear what our participants that are actually out there and trying to get involved in these things would like to know about the sport. Finally, without holding everyone up too long now, thank you very much for giving up your Monday night for the second time, Simon. I couldn't thank you enough for all of the help that you've given us. So thank you very much.
Very happy to help, Corey.
Nathan, thanks very much. Really interesting stories there on syndication, and thanks very much for your time.
No worries, mate. Thanks for having us on.
Mitch, I know that you've got lots and lots on, so you've been pretty hard to get hold of lately because you've got a lot of horses in work at the moment. So thanks very much for your time, and best wishes with the upcoming races.
Thanks very much. Hopefully we've been able to give everyone a bit of an insight, and good luck. Well, I think I'll appear next week, but hopefully everyone's tuning in and enjoying a little bit, and hopefully we'll see you at a racetrack nearby at some or sometime in the near future.
Thanks very much. And David, thanks very much for your insight into the, I know you had a few technical difficulties with hearing us at the start, and for those of you before we came on, there was a few curse words coming out of David's mouth trying to get on, but you got on and you've been fantastic, and some of your stories are awesome, and I wish you all the best with both your horses running, but also with now you have the stallion, I Am Immortal, so you must be very proud of that, and thanks very much for giving us your time.
Yeah, thanks, Corey. Yeah, we are pretty excited about I Am Immortal, and if anybody sees me at the races, come up and say hello, and we'll have a beer together, because that's what racing's about. Ownership's fun. I've been a punter in my life, but the thrill of owning a horse that wins a race is better than anything I've ever experienced. So encourage everyone to get involved.
Yeah, and I've been lobbying all of the trainers, all of our professionals, to see how we can all get involved. There's been a few people asking me questions, and if you have any questions at all, send them through to myself, and I can always point you in the right direction. That's the whole point of these webinars, and I'm quite humbled by how popular they've been. So thanks everyone. Thanks. That's the end for this week, and we'll see you all again next week. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Corey. See you, mate. See you, boys.
Cheers.